Okay, my subs really like it when I react to Rich. And as you know, we don't always get along on the support side and the non-support side. Sometimes it's hard to see that it's a person that has that opinion, and you're just mad at the opinion. So a good way for me to react to Rich in a civil way. I'm not here to ridicule anyone. I'm not going to say anything over here that I wouldn't say on his panel. Uh, I might keep a few choice words back, but this is how we do it. Rich has got for the within the Facebook groups. Rich has got the attention of the support side, and he puts it out, and he does a good job with his programming. He gets the right people together, puts his aces in places, and he does this. And he's not trying to make any money off of it. He's not trying to make himself famous off of it. He just feels like Darlie is innocent. And I don't think there's any other agenda with him with that. I think that things go on that he has no control of, but that does not change his opinion of the case. And sometimes we'll get harsh with it. It gets harsh. I don't mean to be personal. If I see him that way, I don't. But I kind of take this case personal. And so I'm just going through episode 39, visitation report, and 143 slides of proven innocence, part 2. Now, I don't usually go over their pictures of things because everyone can interpret a picture a different way. I am more an instinctual visual audio of what I hear and what I read. Now, because a picture could mean a whole lot of different things to a lot of different people if you turn it a different way or something like that. So maybe I'll start getting into that too. There are some areas that they speak in that if I'm not sure about it, I can't sit and just make reasons why it's wrong. So, but this right here, this is Annie Oakley, and she's Kathy Ramsey, and I'm not picking on her. Not trying to pick on her. I don't have any problems with her. She actually chatted with me a couple of months ago in the chat. Well, I don't have, if we cross paths somewhere, I don't have any issues with her. She might not like me, but she's she's old school. Kathy is old school. That's the best way to describe her. But here we go.
He tended to sleep with the door closed.
She's saying that Darren tended to sleep with the door closed, which I don't know how. I mean, I've got my buddy Jay, I've known for 40 years. I couldn't tell if he slept with the door open or shut. I couldn't. I'm not hanging around in their house late at night when they're asleep though either. So I don't know how she would know this. We'll take her word for it. How does she know what they tended to do? You have to remember, Kathy was nice enough to respond to me in a couple. We're in a live somewhere together, I think. I don't know, or we were in under a video commenting back. I think it was in a live though. I really don't remember. But I just popped off with, "Hi, how you doing?" I got nothing against her. But I asked her. I said, "When was the last time?" Because I wonder if you're such a good friend, if you want to say that. If you want to, that's I do believe that you had a good relationship with Darlie years ago, and then you could probably give us a different version of Darlie before financial stress and marital stress and offspring stress, all that type of stuff hit her life, and how she handled it. I believe you knew her before that very well, because that's why I asked you how often you had been. You said you'd been to the house on Halloween in '95. And I asked you why you didn't go to the funeral and how come you ain't been the visitor. You said you couldn't make the funeral because your work wouldn't let you off. And I'm sorry, I'd be damned if one of my good friends had lost 2 children in the same night. that any job would tell me I couldn't have off for that. I'll be just thinking about that. And then I asked her why she didn't go to visit. And, because I think Kathy lives in Texas. I ain't trying to talk. I talked to her once on the phone. She left me a really nice, well-educated phone call. We've had little spats, but nothing big. She kicked me out of her group a couple times, blocked me here and there, but she's not totally irrational. But I just want to know, how do you know that Darren tended to sleep with the door shut? I just wondered.
And if there's good insulation between the floors of the house, it would be a muffled, and they had the TV going. As far as what would rouse you from,
She knows a lot about what was going on in that night. She knows about insulation. She knows that Darren sleeps with the door shut. Okay. She's very articulate. I mean,
sleep is unfamiliar sounds. The familiar sounds of maybe Darlie getting up and moving around with the boy.
what did she say here?
Yeah, I've always believed that Darlie was attacked.
And they had the TV going. As far as what would rouse you from sleep is unfamiliar sounds. The familiar sounds of maybe Darlie getting up and moving around with the boys, or the boys talking, unless it was an outright terrified scream, he might not trigger to wake up from that, especially after smoking marijuana. But the unusual sounds that we don't expect to hear would be glass breaking. And so glass breaking to me would be a trigger that would rouse you from sleep.
I would agree with her 100% that unfamiliar sounds are what would wake you up. As a matter of fact, see, I like the conversation where they're actually talking about this, but it says the researchers found that unfamiliar voices triggered more K complexes than familiar voices. They suggest that sounds that could be more threatening are more likely to wake you up. So Kathy is 100% correct here. But I'm going to make a point. She is. She's very articulate. I remember back in the day debating with her. And she doesn't back down. I have to give her that.
I'm not trying to, defend Darren, but I do find that's a very short time period to go into deep REM sleep, where it's hard to rouse you from, what did he say? He went to bed about 1:15?
I think he said he went to sleep around 1 a.m.
The news was on.
About 1 a.m. So most of the time it takes you 20 minutes to first start falling into the first levels of sleep, and you only get into REM 3 or 4 hours into your sleep.
And here's the thing. I'm going to give her some credit here, because I looked up exactly what she's saying, and she's absolutely 100% correct. She's absolutely correct.
And he was also stoned. That we know.
So that could, that could suppress his things, but you don't wake.
She's absolutely correct. Let me get rid of this. It actually takes longer to reach REM sleep, or rapid eye movement, while using cannabis. Let's see what I got here. See, I like the AI overview. While smoking weed can potentially help you to fall asleep faster, it's not recommended to expect to enter deep REM sleep immediately after consumption, as THC can actually suppress REM sleep, meaning you may enter deep sleep quicker, but spend less time in the dreaming REM stage. The exact time to reach deep sleep can vary depending on the dose and the individual factors. But generally, you would need to wait at least 30 to 60 minutes after consuming cannabis to experience its full sleep, including effects. So they're saying 30 to 60 minutes here, even though I agree with her. But there is a timeline. There's a timeline, according to the experts, 30 to 60 minutes. So he could have been in a deep sleep. But that's not really important. But I look into everything that people say, and I look. She's right here, except for this. There's always this except for. I wish that the Darlie Routier supporters, really, and honestly, I mean this honestly, I'm not trying to be an asshole. I wish that tomorrow there was some evidence or something that told me that Darlie was innocent. I am not looking for that. I really am not. But Darren could have been in REM sleep. Just a small point.
Wake up to, if you live by a train track, you get to where, and they have trains that run every hour. I promise you get to where you sleep through it because it's the familiar sounds, and you might even wake up.
It helps you sleep. The sound of a train will help you sleep if you live near one. I know.
Up if the schedule is off and they don't come on time.
Yep.
Well,
I know this because
here's something else you can also say. Okay, now they also found a plate with a razor blade with cocaine residue on it.
They said a white powdery substance. It could have been a chopped up pill, to be honest with you. Some people were snorting woozies back then, or Loratabs, a pain pill called Schwooze and Woozies. And they chop it up and put it on a plate, and you get the same sweet drain you would get from cocaine. Yeah, but Woozies and Schwooze helped you to relax. Loratab. Look it up. That was popular back then. It could have been chopped up pill. There's people snorting pills all the time back then.
Now, anybody that's ever done cocaine knows that cocaine keeps you awake.
Cocaine keeps you wide awake.
Cocaine is a speed.
I haven't done cocaine since like the early or the mid 90s, and I'm still awake.
So you could also equally say, well, if you did the cocaine,
I really don't like cocaine. I just like the way it smells.
Awake from the stimulation of the cocaine.
Not necessarily, though, because if you do it enough, there are times that it can relax you. Like if anybody's ever heard of a gummy for all those hippies from back in the day when cocaine was really popular. I went through I snorted up a house or two, I'm sure of it. But we used to do these gummies. You'd get a gel-like toothpaste, and you'd put it on your gums like a toothpaste with your finger. Put it on your gums. Then you dip your finger in some really nice powder and rub that on your gums. It was called a gummy, and that would put you to sleep. It gives you a face buzz that would, if you sat down, you'd fall asleep. Do a gummy.
Well, we don't know if he ingested cocaine that night or marijuana because he wasn't, and marijuana'd show up for 30 days and cocaine only shows up for about 3 or 4.
She's absolutely right. And they use cocaine, they cut your hair to get that.
Unless you do some really intensive blood work on them, you're not going to find actual cocaine. You're going to find some of the side stuff that's in it, that's in their blood.
She's right.
But you're not going to diagnose, without a blood test or drug test, and they didn't do him. So we don't know if he even did drugs that night or it was just residue and stuff that they had.
Well, there were 3 roaches, half of blunts or half of joints in the ashtray near Darren's bed.
That was his cocaine plate, and so he kept his stuff there. And so he would use it when he got cocaine. But
She's
Right,
logical.
but we
since he
don't
was
know.
not tested,
Right.
right, he wasn't tested for drugs because, and she was simply because she was a patient in the hospital, and that's routine.
I don't know why they would ask Darren to strip nude and take pictures of him, though, and not give him a drug test. It seemed like that would be important if they were really focused on him as a suspect. They weren't sure. It looked like an inside job, and they had their eyebrows raised, but they didn't go that far with it.
And she didn't have cocaine or marijuana.
No,
So we know that she didn't ingest either one of those substances.
Mr. St.
Or at
John,
least the cocaine within.
I have never heard that before.
I don't know
Mr.
what.
St. John said if you do a lot of it, it can help you relax, though. I've never heard of that. I've never heard that cocaine could relax you.
Depends on how often you do it. It's like there are some people that I know that can drink coffee all day long and it helps them sleep like a baby. But for me, if I drink 2 cups of coffee, I'm done. I am on a mission. I can't have it. It raises my blood pressure and everything. I can't relax on that shit.
If you do a lot of it, I know it can make you paranoid as hell, but I don't know of it
I never got paranoid on coke.
relaxing anybody. I've never seen that or heard that before. That's actually very interesting that he said. I have never heard that before. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Annie. I'm sorry.
I must have said that in the chat.
That's okay. And I kind of contest that as far as the classification of drug that cocaine is. And if it has that effect, it's very rare on someone because it is.
It's very like if you're on for days. And that might just be because you're fucking tired, to be honest with you.
Is considered in the same class of drugs. That's why there's so many cocaine derivatives used in painkillers, and they tell you to not operate heavy machinery and drive and such because you have impaired. And you may feel up and you may feel better, and you may feel more relaxed if you're anxiety ridden, but you still have increased blood pressure and heart rate.
She's right.
And I have to step away for one moment. I will be back. Tara, if you can continue the commentary with what's on the screen, that would be great for a few moments, and I'll be back.
We're just going to drop
Sorry,
the kids
did
off
you
at
want
the
me
pool.
to read the slides?
They want you to continue the conversation, Tara. It's like, yeah,
Yes.
Oh, I can't hear him.
slides.
Okay.
Shit.
So, where are we? At the top of this first slide?
Number 17.
Yeah.
Yes.
Number 17, first responders. Police officer David Waddell was the first to arrive on the scene, followed by paramedics. The police needed to be satisfied that the possible intruder was no longer in the house. David Waddell noted husband Darren leaving the house twice, once to go to the house of nurse Karen Neal across the street, and a second time a few minutes later for an unexplained reason. Forensic investigator James Cron conducted a cursory 20-minute walkthrough at 5:45 a.m.
That's totally
So,
incorrect. Police officer David Waddell was the first to arrive on the
Wait a minute, I'm gonna see what she's talking about. Okay.
scene, but he was not followed by the paramedics.
Let me check that out. Now, Waddell is talking about sitting in the Victory Baptist Church parking lot. And here he says, I heard the fire tones go off. Okay, so that means the ambulance would have got the direct call.
Another officer arrived. I believe his name was Walling.
Walling, yeah. Walling, that is correct. I don't know where she got this from, but she's correct. Now, unless they just simply met, that he got there, and not that he was like immediately followed by paramedics, like they were right behind him, but he does say that he heard the fire tones, and that means the paramedics would be dispatched around the same time as him. So if he pulled up and then took Darren into the house and then the paramedics arrived, he was followed by the paramedics. We don't know what amount of time it was, though. We know that through the paramedics' testimony, too, that, once Waddell was in the house, Walling came, and then they had to clear the scene so the paramedics could come in. And I believe it was Officer Walling that walked out and clarified to Byford that they could go in. So we know that they weren't directly behind him. So I think we're using a little bit of word semantics here. We're missing word semantics.
Because that's totally incorrect. Police officer David Waddell was the first to arrive on the scene, but he was not followed by the paramedics.
Well, like I said, it depends on what you mean by followed. I think we're playing a little bit of semantics with this word followed. If they got there after him, then the first to arrive was Waddell. That was followed by paramedics. That was followed by Matt Walling. That was followed by Jimmy Patterson. That's what they mean by that. I think we're playing semantics here. Because we all know that the scene had to be cleared and everything else. If they followed him, it would have been in his testimony that he told them to stay back. Or the paramedics would have testified that they saw Waddell take Darren into the house at gunpoint. Just like Gorsuch saw it. So we know that's just common sense there. And then sometimes being really articulate and sounding, extremely bright, you just got to listen. You got to listen to everything that's being said, apparently.
Another officer arrived. I believe his name was Walling.
His name was Matt Walling.
Chris Walling.
Matt Walling.
And he arrived before the paramedics did. He is the one who entered the garage and cleared the house while Waddell stood there with the family. And then he's the one and the paramedics were already outside, and he had stopped them. Yeah. At one point, he went.
Yeah, so we know that unequivocally that they're not meaning that, that they were right on Waddell's bumper. It just means followed by. Just like if you go to a concert, you might get lucky and get to see Breaking Benjamin, followed by 3 Days Grace.
They had to clear the house first, and he cleared the garage because that's where Darlie had said she had seen the intruder leave from. And I don't think he went upstairs at that point, but then he allowed the paramedics to come in. And so there was a delay in treatment for Damon, but unless it had a pneumothoracic surgeon in the front yard set up with a surgical suite, he really could not have been saved. And Devin had already passed. So Waddell gives many conflicting statements that he has made. And
Waddell with the conflicting statements, but Darlie didn't make any. See, it was okay for Darlie to remember a little bit here, and she had this going on. It was a big scene, and remember something later on, and remember it here. It's okay for Darlie to do that, you guys.
The mock trial, and in interviews.
Oh, yeah, I love how they love to say that mock trial. I love how they love to say that, like that's something suspicious. Can you believe that fucking DA? He was talking to his potential witnesses before they got on the stand. What is wrong? Get her out of there now, by God, because no prosecutor has ever done that before. They just call you in, put you right on the stand, and you don't know what the hell they're going to ask you. He's allowed to ask. He's allowed to tell them what they're going to ask him because the defense can do the same thing.
Later that are just complete and totally false.
Yeah. Darren said, "I don't remember 72 times in the trial," and I got this out of one of the books. And Darlie was 67 times. I don't remember. And you personally see them call people flat out liars. Jamie Johnson's a liar. Bill Parker's a liar. Waddell's a liar. They're all lying. All of them. But Darlie and Darren, nope. Them stand-up crowd right there, by God. Everybody's lying.
Department and went to another department.
He went to the other department, Kathy, because he took a better job over there. Policing is very competitive. So if he's seen an opening for a higher pay grade in a different district and applied for that, he's still there. Is that fishy to you that officers change police departments? Some officers become attorneys. Some officers go into medics. Is that? It looked to me like he upgraded his career. If he didn't see any chance to advance at the Rowlett Police Department and saw an open spot at the Plano for a lieutenant of the neighborhood community-based policing, he applied for that job and took it. What's wrong with it? He still got it. I don't understand you.
And the first I've ever heard is that he left the house twice. Gorsh testified that Darren was screaming in the front yard, and that is what aroused him to go look out the window. And when he looked out the window, he saw Waddell arrive and stop him with a gun and make him go back inside. And then he saw him leave later and go to...
Aaron says that doesn't happen. Crime fighter Lloyd Harrell will have you believe that Waddell went in the house by himself and Darren was already in there working on Devin when Waddell walked in, and that the intruder slipped right out the front door and Waddell let him go.
Because she's a nurse. But he was stopped by the first officer and made to return to the scene. And so him leaving after that, he observed him twice, then that would have him leaving the house 3 times. And this is the first I've ever heard of...
That's more semantics. That doesn't prove or disprove that Darlie's guilty or innocent. That's just semantics. Remember, David Waddell might not have recalled things until later on when he wrote his notes down, right? That has no bearing on anything. If this is what you're trying to debunk. If Waddell saw Darren come out and go near the fountain, then he took him back in, and then he went out again. He's left the house twice. Then he went out the second time to try and get in the ambulance with Darlie. I don't know why they would say unexplained reason.
He went to get Karen, and then he left a third time. So
because
this is
Waddell, like Brian's saying, actually inserted himself into the case. He wasn't actually, like, there's a few people in Darlie's case that actually inserted themselves. They were never originally supposed to be part of the investigation. And Waddell...
Well, no, they didn't care who. What do you mean they're not supposed to be part of the investigation? He heard a fire code about a stabbing. What do you expect him to do as a police officer that's ready to do his job? You expect him to sit in that parking lot? No. What Barb Davis wrote was that Waddell poured his coffee out and he took off, and she talked to Waddell. It wasn't like he was asleep in his cruiser. Well, that's his job, is to insert himself into a stabbing that's 1.9 miles away from his location in the middle of the night in a town that doesn't see much crime like that. How can he justify not rushing to the scene? Because when Waddell took off, he did not radio in that he was going over there. He just went over there. And he was like 1.9 miles away. I did a video on where he was actually sitting in his route to get there. No, he did his job. That's what he's supposed to do. What's he supposed to do? Hear that and just say, fuck that, I ain't going?
Waddell actually went to the scene. She
She wasn't, because she was saying there's an officer at your door right now. That was Walling. Waddell was already in the house. She didn't know it. So you had different people talking on the 4 people talking on the 911 call.
He did not report, and
yeah, she didn't even know he had gone to the scene. She had dispatched someone else to the scene. So that's why you hear.
Well, Tara, you say things like he inserted himself in there and he threw everything off. No, he didn't. That's what he's supposed to do. He should have called, radioed in. I'll give you that.
A lot of confusion in the 911 call as well.
It's not a whole lot of confusion if you've listened to it hundreds of times.
About sort of officers arriving. Is the police officer there yet? And things like that.
And he'd been there been there and telling her, he testifies in court that he tells her to get a rag. Well, to get towels is what he testifies to, that he tells her to get aid for the boys. He can be heard saying, get a rag.
So that makes Darlie innocent. A rag and a towel are basically the same things. We're playing a lot of semantics with the words here.
And she reports that she's dizzy.
Aaron reported that Darlie didn't even know she was hurt. She wasn't worried about herself. She was worried about the boys.
No condition to be administering first aid or getting him anything. He could have continued to guard the home. And
he was trying to give her ideas because she was standing. He didn't know how badly she was injured. She's standing up, giving him responses. She had she should have been down with those boys. She wasn't.
And render aid.
And it's not the law that he's required to render aid. You are now okay. See where articulation only gets you so far. It is not his duty to render aid when he walks into a home invasion where 2 children have been stabbed and they don't know. He came in here. He doesn't know if the house is clear or not. It is his job to clear the scene and protect, then serve. So if he would have been that, let's say he stopped everything and he gets down and he's helping with Devin or Damon, and that intruder jumped up from behind that counter and killed Darlie. With him right there. Or if he was down, leaving himself vulnerable. No. That is not a law. I'd like for the supporters to bring that up in another video. If they would. I mean, I only suggest things. I don't tell you what to do. But I would like to see that. Where that's a law. A lot of times you can just let Google be your detective. I already knew this because we discussed this before. The first 2 priorities for a first responder at a crime scene are to preserve and secure the scene and render first aid to the injured. You had an unknown intruder that just stabbed 2 kids in there, and he'd only been in there for a minute and a half. It was not secure. So he went out in the garage, as she directed him to, because his first priority is to make sure that it's secure. All right? Now, let's go further. What is the first priority of the first responding officer? The first priority of the initial responding officer is to ensure the safety of individuals involved in the incident. This includes securing the area and preventing further harm before gathering evidence or making arrests. Untimely Ultimately, safety must come first to effectively handle the situation. Now, in my opinion, like Rich always says, he puts that O on there. In my opinion, if an officer's called to a stabbing like Waddell was, and she's saying he went out the garage, it just happened, his first priority is to secure that scene. That's why he didn't go completely all the way in the garage, because he needed to keep his eye on what was going on out there. So he went towards the garage, sort of, and kind of looked out there, and then he came back in. I don't even think he left eyesight. And then he came back in. Now, let's say Officer Waddell is sitting at a steakhouse somewhere, and he's off duty even. And he sees someone choking on a piece of meat. As a police officer, even off duty, it is his job to help and provide life-saving measures to that person that may be choking. Or a heart attack. If there's a heart attack or something like that, Waddell would be responsible for getting 911 out there as quickly as possible. Or maybe even possibly doing chest compressions. But on a stabbing of two little boys, his first priority is, where's that fucking intruder? He don't want that guy to jump out and do any more harm than he's already done to this family. But let's knock him for that. Well, we need to use our common sense here a little bit.
It's the law.
That is not the law. So, you think that the Texas police listened to his testimony? Why didn't someone one of them say, hey, you broke the fucking law? Why didn't the defense say that? Why didn't the defense say, how come you didn't jump down and help? You're worried about why he didn't help. I'll tell you the reality of it is, those aren't his kids. Those are Darlie's kids. She had more incentive to go help than he did. His incentive was to clean the house. Well, not clean it. He should have cleaned it. Well, I meant clear the house. He's looking around to see if there's an intruder. He knows that fire codes have been called and the ambulance is on the way.
I want to ask Mimi a question.
I don't know who Mimi is.
Because Mr. St. John said that the tests were done and it showed that Darlie was not in shock at the time of the murders.
They did a field test. And I learned about this field test from the testimony. That's where they press in on your thumbnail. And if it immediately jumps back to white like it should, then you're not in shock.
To find out if somebody is in shock.
Usually they will take the vital signs. The vital signs will show whether or not they're elevated. It'll show
Her vitals as well, and she was 140/80, which is slightly elevated on the low side. Just a little bit. I've got chronic hypertension, and mine runs 130/70 on average. But I didn't just get stabbed and somebody killed my kids either.
stabbing. So are they alert and oriented, to person, place, and time? Do they know what's
She's not mentioning the field shock thing with the finger. I think Rich might bring it up.
going on? Are they, a lot of times people I'm sorry, my brain's foggy. I'm nursing COVID over here. But a lot of times if you have the symptoms of shock, then the vital signs will coincide with it. So shaking or traumatic, like seizure-like movements. It depends, because sometimes people will have the vital signs to show they're in shock, but they won't have a lot of symptoms. They'll just be kind of catatonic and staring off into space. So it's a pretty large range of things all tied together.
She's absolutely right.
I would say she was in shock, even though some people say, oh, her blood pressure was fine. Her blood pressure was probably low because of loss of blood volume. So you have to keep that in mind too. So it's not going to be crazy high. She's losing blood. So that would have kind of counter-affected the vital signs for shock.
Well, I do know that Darlie passed out at the front door. She passed out cold. before actually getting onto a gurney and getting in.
Where do you get that from, Rich?
To the ambulance. And she told me that. I didn't even know that that happened. She told me that.
She told you that, but that's not what the paramedics say.
And then if you look at the crime scene evidence, there's a pool of blood right on the outside of the front door. That's where she passed out. She said the next thing she remembered is she woke up and they were working on her.
This is from EMT Brian Koshak's direct testimony. Now, did you stay inside the residence with her, or was she crying or screaming? No. Now, did you stay inside the residence with her, or did you take her somewhere to treat her? I asked her to come with me to the front porch. I wanted to get out of the house and deemed it necessary for both of us. Be a good thing to get out of the house. All right, did she follow your instructions? Did she go with you to the front porch? She did. Did she seem to have any difficulties understanding what you want her to do at that point? No, sir. So you spent a short time inside and then you went out to the front porch and you began assessing her injuries again. Is that right? That's correct. Now again, when you were trying to assess a patient for possible treatment, paramedic, what are you looking for? What type of things are you looking for? Looking for excessive blood loss due to her appearance and shock. Looking for shock due to lacerations in the blood that she had in her chest area. I was looking for hypovolemic shock in this case. Okay, so you're looking, I guess, you've looked at her injuries by this time, right? And you're looking for excessive bleeding and you're looking for shock. That's correct. Okay, now why is it important for you to make that assessment quickly on a patient? Because that's a life-threatening injury. Okay, and as a paramedic, have you received training in assessing individuals for shock? Yes, sir. All right, let me ask you again, if you will. How many hours does it take to become a paramedic? You have to be an EMT first, which is about 200 hours, and then that's roughly 700 hours clinical and pediatric training after that to be a paramedic. When you're talking about what is pediatric, didactic, and also your clinical rotations. What is the didactic part? Classroom study. Okay, let's move down. What can happen if an individual has gone into shock as far as threatening their life? Can they actually lose enough blood when they're going to die? Yes. Well, when you got out there on the porch, did you in fact assess Miss Routier to determine whether or not she was suffering from shock? I did. Okay, and just describe for the members of the jury what you did out there that morning to determine whether or not she was suffering from shock or not. I noted her appearance, her color, being pale, which could be significant blood loss. She had a good skin color, good skin temperature. I touched her arm. And I also performed a capillary regional check where you push down on the nail bed and it was a good blood return. That means she had adequate blood pressure at the time. Decreasing blood pressure would be a sign or is a sign of shock. Okay, when you're assessing someone for shock, are you looking for their actions and reactions, blah, blah, blah? I am. What types of things are you looking for? Alert? Can she follow commands? That sort of questioning. Were you talking to her outside the porch also? Did Miss Routier appear to be oriented at the time, place, person at that time? She did. Did she seem to understand the information you were trying to give her? Yes, she was alert and oriented. Darlie told me that herself, that she passed out on the front porch. And there's blood there. If you lose enough blood, that you could go into shock. There's nothing in his testimony. All right, did anyone at any time come to the front porch to help you start treating Miss Routier? Yes, sir. Who would that have been? Paramedic Larry Byford. He assisted in putting bandages on the wounds. Did you stay up there at the front porch with the defendant, or did you take her somewhere for additional treatment? I called her for a stretcher. We placed her on a stretcher and took her to the ambulance. Now, when did she pass out? Because Koshak here says that he wanted her to come to the front porch with him. And he was on the front porch with her the whole time she was there. He didn't feel like she was in shock. Don't you think that if she would have fell out, that would be in this paramedic's testimony? Or is he lying? The shock test was the capillary test. I'll take a look. A capillary refill test, also known as a capillary refill time, CRT test, is a simple, non-invasive way to check for blood flow changes that can indicate shock. It can also help detect dehydration. That's the test he did on her. And this young nurse, Mimi, she just described how you can test for shock. And Mystery Maverick is in the chat saying, Bryan, you can't test or measure for psychological shock. But she didn't fall unconscious because there's no testimony to that. Darlie told you that. Darlie told you that, but that's not what happened at the scene.
A symptom of shock.
Remember, Koshak and Byford would have saw her pass out on the porch, Rich. You're spreading misinformation, buddy.
Vital signs when she was in the ambulance, and if she passed out, I haven't been able to find anything like that.
It's because it didn't happen. Thank you for letting him go nicely. It didn't happen. I just read the testimony. There was 2 paramedics that were right there with her on the porch, and she didn't pass out at all.
My knowledge. This is to my knowledge. Her blood pressure in the ambulance was slightly elevated, but normal.
Okay, see, so if you think
140 over 80. Slightly elevated is never normal. I did do my research on that while I'm editing, and he's correct. 140 over 80 is high, slightly high, but normal. It doesn't indicate to me somebody who just went through that scene, though. Kind of high, though.
which would make you hypotensive, low blood pressure,
Remember, you guys, Darlie told him, I'm going to go back to that. That's where I'm going to go.
crazy high, she's losing blood. So that would have kind of counter-affected the vital signs for shock.
Well, I do know that Darlie passed out at the front door. She passed out cold.
You knew that? Because it's not in the testimony. The 2 paramedics didn't see it happen. So when we're going through the trial transcripts, you can look in my group, Darlie Routier War Room. You can go in the files section of that group, and you can click on the trial transcripts and read Paramedic Byford and Paramedic Koshak's testimony. They both went up to the porch with her. But this is why we give you shit, Rich, because Darlie told me.
Before actually getting onto a gurney and getting into the ambulance. And she told me that. I didn't even know that happened.
It didn't happen. It didn't happen, Rich. I'm going to leave that there at that.
Told me that. And then if you look at the crime scene evidence, there's a pool of blood right on the outside of the front door.